Welcome to Beyond This Point Ministries. I'm glad you dropped in. I'm Joyce Oglesby, your host. If this is your first time visiting, you're joining part 2 of a series presented by our daughter, Marcy LaHue. I would encourage you to catch part 1 in order to be up to speed with her comments from last week. I'd also encourage you to go to my website, find out about my ministry, and contact me with any questions you may have, or if you'd like to book me or even Marcy for an event at your church or women's organization. I'm all about the preservation of our precious family history. It's under attack every single day. As women, as wives, as mothers, we're called to be strong and stand firm in our convictions for our Lord and to do our very best to rear God-fearing children in a world that is under fire by Satan's fierce assault. I know you're anxious to hear the rest of Marcy's 2-part series on For Such a Time as This. I also know you're in for a real blessing. Listen as Marcy shares her timely message about the plight of our country today and thus our families.
Did you happen to read the April 13, 2009 article in Newsweek magazine entitled The Decline and Fall of Christian America? Did anyone else feel completely sickened as they read it? The cover alone was enough to set me off. Is this not just one more example that makes you feel like God's people are under attack? Thank God we live in America, and one of our constitutional rights is the freedom of press and publication. But do you honestly think it would have been the cover of Newsweek 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago? In the article, Newsweek editor John Meacham states that America has not only become less Christian, but moved into a post-Christian phase. This is not to say that the Christian God is dead, he writes, but that he is less of a force in American politics and culture than at any other time in recent memory. I was so mad when I saw this. It absolutely enraged me. Why? Maybe because he's right? We as Christians assimilated so much within our culture that Christianity is declining and falling in our nation. The article basically elaborates on recent polling that showed a 10% decline in Americans affiliating themselves with Christianity. That is just the science of polling. But look at our struggles, especially as of late. Do you feel like inside you are weeping and wailing? Maybe not just internally either, but you literally wept over a situation or personal circumstance that you feel is beyond your control. We are experiencing something we never thought we would right now. Many of us personally, and I would say definitely collectively as Americans, are in crisis mode. We have feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, confusion. Some of us are angry. Others of us just worry ourselves sick. Now, our physical lives are not being threatened as the Jews were in the book of Esther, but our spiritual lives are most certainly being threatened. Our assimilation into Persia threatens our eternal existence with God. And we, like the Jews, should be weeping and wailing and possibly even fasting. See, God allowed a crisis among the Jews to return their hearts to Him. Perhaps God is allowing a crisis among Christians in America to return our hearts to Him. In their assimilation to a godless culture, the Jews had forgotten their sustainer, their protector, their Lord. Though they had forgotten their God, He had not forgotten them. He used the opportunity of a crisis to not only return the hearts of His people to Him, He also placed a woman in a position to help save His people and to reveal to her her purpose. See, what we must always remember is that no crisis we experience is greater than God's will for our lives. Esther, I'm sure, was floored when the king chose her out of all of the most beautiful young girls in Persia. I bet she wondered every day, what in the world am I doing here? Of course, then she learned of the crisis thrust upon her fellow Jews, and it was then that the million-dollar question was posed to her. And who knows, whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this. What? She's thinking. It's up to me? Yes, I am the queen and everything, but it's up to me to save an entire people from destruction? Oh yeah, and save myself too, I guess, huh? No. I did not ask for this. I never imagined I would be put in this position where I can make a difference of this significance. She doubts herself for a moment. Then, light bulb. God's will is clear. His plan is unfolding before her eyes, and she understands why she was chosen. She went from, it's up to me, to, it's up to me. She asked her people to fast. And with fasting, they were praying fervently for Esther, and she prayed and fasted for guidance and strength. God placed a plan out before her, guided her through the crisis, and saved his people through Esther. No, we are not the Queen of Persia, the Queen of England, the First Lady. Many of us are not congresswomen. And I know we don't always feel like queens as we scrub the toilets, change the 10th diaper of the day, do the 5th load of laundry in a week, type another memo, answer another phone call, take another test. My husband calls me a queen, but he always calls me a drama queen, and that's not the same thing. But who knows if we have not all been placed in our marriages, our families, our school systems, our churches, our friendships, our workplaces, our communities, our nation for such a time as this. The question is not, what time is this? Ladies, we are in our for such a time as this time. We are in crisis mode, have been for a while, and I believe we've only seen the beginning of our crisis. The question is, who knows? Let me tell you who knew then for Esther, and who knows now for you, God. No matter how Satan tries to thwart the will of the Almighty, God's will cannot be stopped. He is in control of everything. His will be done, and he has chosen you, called you out, set you apart, appointed you to a position in this world that no one else has been appointed to. You are your husband's wife. You are your children's mother. You are your parents' child. You are your friend's friend. You are your boss's subordinate. You are your employee's boss. You are your PTA's chairwoman. The list goes on and on. Yes, others may hold the same title as you, but you are unique in your standing in those particular positions. For such a time as this, we are called to be the salt of the earth, the light of the world, the city on a hill. We are not called to assimilate, accept the culture, and feel at home and comfortable in a land where we were to remain strangers. God is trying to use us, this generation of people, right now, old, young, middle-aged, all generations. He is using a crisis to call our hearts back to him. His will is going to be done regardless of whether we choose to accept his will as our own will. Esther 4:14 in its entirety reads, "For if you remain silent at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this." If we remain silent, comfortable, continue to assimilate, do not seize our opportunity in such a time as this, God will bring relief and deliverance for his people, but possibly in another generation, in another household, in another marriage, in another friendship, in another workplace, in another community, in another nation. Will you and your family receive the blessing that flow from the hands of God, whose people are obedient and who make his will their will? Esther chose not to remain silent. She chose to be used by God in an awesome way. And when news spread throughout the kingdom that the king's decree had stated that God's people would be spared, do you know what they did? They created a holiday to memorialize their deliverance and to honor their God. Here are those 3 verses I mentioned earlier. Esther 8:17. For each and every province and in each and every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree arrived, there was gladness and joy for the Jews, a feast and a holiday. And many among the peoples of the land became Jews, for the dread of the Jews had fallen upon them. Esther 9:19. Therefore, the Jews of the rural areas who live in the rural towns make the 14th day of the month, Adar, a holiday for rejoicing and feasting and sending portions of food to one another. And Esther 9:22, because on those days the Jews rid themselves of their enemies, and it was a month which was turned from them from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and rejoicing, and sending portions of food to one another, and gifts to the poor. You see, God uses personal crises and collective crises to return people's hearts to Him. Your witness to others is how God delivers you through your crises. These times of deliverance are to be celebrated, made into holidays. If God uses you to win a family member, coworker, friend, stranger to Christ, celebrate. Every year, set the day aside on your calendar and make it a holiday for that person and your family. Get together, have a nice dinner, and celebrate how God delivers us. Talk about not being able to secularize a holiday. That celebration will be all about God. No questions asked. No white-bearded man in a red suit or fluffy bunny holding a basket can threaten the significance of that holiday. Esther was faithful to her calling and to God's will for her life. Of course she was terrified. God doesn't promise it will be easy to stand for Him. For some of us, it's risky, as it was for Esther. In fact, God tells us in John 16:33, "These things I have spoken to you, so that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take courage, I have overcome the world." And again, in James chapter 1, verse 2, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance." And 1:12, "Blessed is a man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love Him." He has promised us eternity when we live for Him and do His will in this foreign land. Eternity in the place that we can call home, be comfortable in, have everlasting joy, no sorrow, no pain, free from crisis, where every day will be a holiday. Thank you for tuning in to Beyond This Point Ministries. Tune in next week, and Mom, Joyce Oglesby, will present a message about how to develop a relationship between you and your children that will stand the test of time. May God bless your life, your home, and your families.